Today on the show, we're going to be talking about Madame Web. If you didn't know that there were two of them, then this show is for you. So the first Madame Web, who a lot of you might know from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, would first appear in The Amazing Spider-Man 210 in 1980. She is a psychic precognitive mutant, and like a lot of other psychic precognitive mutants, she has a form of disability. She is blind and paralyzed. She is also almost consistently connected to a life support system that was created for her by her husband, Jonathan Webb. Spider-Man and Madame Web would first work together when the Daily Globe publisher, K.J. Clayson, would be kidnapped. On this adventure, Madame Web would actually divine Spider-Man's secret identity and find out that he was Peter Parker, and obviously that was a huge risk for Spider-Man. However, on another adventure, she would be captured by Juggernaut and she would call out to Spider-Man to rescue her, but by the time Spider-Man turned up, she had been ripped from her life support system. After being reattached to her chair, which is her life support system, it would be revealed that this whole ordeal was such a big shock to her body that she suffered memory loss and actually forgot Spider-Man's identity. I find this kind of interesting because I really like Madame Web, and I think if she remembered Spider-Man's identity, things would have gone down a very different road. Charlotte Witter, who was the fourth Spider-Woman, would eventually go about trying to steal the powers of the other Spider-Woman, and it's actually thanks to Madame Web that Charlotte Witter was stopped and Mattie Franklin became the main Spider-Woman for a very long time. I do just want to say that Mattie Franklin and Jessica Drew have both gone by the identity of Spider-Woman, and they both have been active at the same time in the past. Also around this time, Madame Web would do an arcane ritual called the Gathering of Five and would regain the ability to walk. It's also worth saying that the arcane ritual would restore Madame Web's youth and make her immortal, which just shows how powerful she is. However, after House of M, her youth and immortality has been taken away from her, but she is one of the few hundred mutants to retain their powers. This obviously implies that if she did not do the arcane ritual, she would have lost her mutant powers, which is a horrible thing to think about because really, that's all she's got to live for. Web would disappear for a little while and would reappear in The Amazing Spider-Man number 600, where she would look into the future for Spider-Man and would proclaim that someone was hunting spiders and someone was unraveling the web of fate. Soon after this, both Madame Web and Mattie Franklin would be captured by the Kravinoffs, and they would both be killed here, but before Madame Web could be killed, she would transfer her powers to Julia Carpenter, the second Spider-Woman. Now we're on to Julia Carpenter, who a lot of you might know from the 90s Iron Man cartoon. She was the second Spider-Woman, the second Arachne, and the second Madame Web. She would first appear in Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 6 in 1984. Julia would get her powers when a group called The Commission wanted to create their own superhero. Julia's friend Val would convince her to take part in an athletic study, and in the study she would be injected with all sorts of spider venoms and exotic plant cocktails. The results of all this experimentation that Julia did not know was going on were her gaining powers very similar to Spider-Man's. She would meet Spider-Man and the Avengers in the first Secret Wars, and upon returning to Earth she would join the Freedom Force. Now, the Freedom Force was this government-operated group of heroes, but it mostly consisted of villains that joined the group as opposed to going to prison. On her first mission, she was sent to arrest the X-Men, and here she realized working with villains might not be a good idea, and on her second mission, she was sent to arrest the Avengers without trial, and here she realized, no, this group is a bad thing. She would help out the Avengers and free them from their arrest, and after this, she would team up with Spider-Man and Iron Man on occasion. Much later on, she would meet the Avengers West Coast and help them defeat the Pacific Overlords, and she would very quickly gain membership to the team. This would lead her to battle Ultron, Mephisto, Dr. Dominicus, and even participate in the Infinity War. Eventually, the Avengers West Coast would split up and she would join ForceWorks. And this was a nice team, but none of their adventures were really big or grand. Later on, a group called Deathweb would turn up and they would oppose Julia quite frequently. They gained their powers in the exact same way that Julia gained hers, so all of their powers were a slight variation of Julia's. Deathweb would eventually capture Julia's daughter, Rachel, and force her to fight Spider-Man for her daughter's safety, but Spider-Man would help Julia take back her daughter and take down Deathweb. After this, she decided being a superhero while having a daughter isn't exactly the best idea, so she would quit being Spider-Woman, and after this, she would be attacked by Charlotte Witter, who would steal her powers. After this, she's just a bit like, okay, so I'm a normal mother now. It's fine, and continues on with her life. She would later resurface in 2006 and participate in the Civil War, and she would side with the Superhero Registration Act. Obviously, this means her powers are back, and she would actually help Miss Marvel train novice heroes. Now, this is what makes this character awesome. It would turn out that she was a double agent, and she wanted to help heroes escape registration. She would tell heroes when the S.H.I.E.L.D. Cape Killer Squad was after them so they could have time to escape. And she was romantically involved with Shroud, who was a huge opponent of the Superhero Registration Act. Julia's true intentions would be revealed when a hero called Prowler would be captured and put under interrogation, and he reveals that Julia tipped him off and he was able to escape earlier on. Then Shroud would reveal that when Julia was attacked and lost her powers, she would be paralyzed for quite some time, but then Shroud's company would recreate the serum that gave her her powers in the first place, and she would be a superhuman again within days. After this, she would go under intense physical therapy, regain the ability to walk, and in this time, she and Shroud would fall in love. Julia would find out that her true intentions have been revealed, so she goes home, gets her daughter, and the two of them prepare to leave the country, but then Miss Marvel turns up at her house and captures her. Julia would escape captivity and she would return to Colorado to look for her daughter, where she would be captured again, but this time when she awakens, Miss Marvel reveals that she wants to help her look for her daughter. After this, she would disappear for quite some time, and then eventually she would fall victim to a grudge match between Spider-Man and the Kravinoff family. Julia would be captured by the Kravinoffs along with Mattie Franklin, Madame Web, and Anya Corazon. Madame Web would be killed and she would transfer her powers to Julia, and Julia would become blind as a side effect, but would also be the new all-powerful Madame Web. For Julia's first action, she would prevent Peter Parker from killing Kraven, stating that if he does this, he would become an all-powerful destroyer and his destiny would change. After she and Spider-Man bury all the victims, she would explain to Peter and Anya that she is now the new Madame Web and she will be both of their guide for quite some time. Next, when the population of Manhattan gets infected with spider powers, Spider-Man would be attacked by the Avengers when he tried to help out. Anti-Venom would go about the city curing individuals of their spider powers, and at the conclusion of this, Julia turns around to Spider-Man and says, "You know this cure will work on you if you don't want to be Spider-Man anymore." Spider-Man would obviously reject this, but then Julia apologizes to him for some suffering that is about to come. Julia would eventually warn Spider-Man that his life was in danger and would tell him what he has to do to stop himself from dying, and obviously he doesn't take heed to this and he dies. Fortunately, as of later this month, Peter Parker is going to undie and is going to be back. After this, the last thing that we see of Julia is her having a very strong vision into the future and then falling into a coma. I really like Julia. I think she's one of my favorite Spider Family characters, so long as she's Madame Web, because she is so powerful, but she's not over-powerful. What I would like to see is Julia and Blindfold from the X-Men have a series together, and they have to alter the future of the Marvel Universe without getting help from anyone else, and obviously they're both blind, so this would be a huge challenge for both of them. I don't know, I just really like Blindfold, and I really like Madame Web, and I think the two of them could work together because Madame Web is always very serious. Even when Julia is Madame Web, she's very serious, and Blindfold is quite serious, but she's also very quirky about being serious.
It's super effective!
Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything important about either Madame Web, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history, and also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.